Hello and welcome to Beyond the Pivot, the podcast where we bring you honest, unfiltered journeys from Africa's entrepreneurs and innovators.
I'm Kabwela Malupande, joined by my co-host Martin Vitek. Each episode, we dive deep into the realities of building and growing businesses on our continent. Let's get started. This is Beyond the Pivot.
Our guest today is Natasha Chiumya, and she is a leading corporate lawyer and property developer with over 2 decades of experience spanning law, development, and entrepreneurship. Natasha co-founded Foloktia and Chiumya Legal Practitioners, which is one of Zambia's first niche corporate and commercial law firm. She has since also built one of the country's most trusted property and legal brands, which is Diaspora Connect, a platform helping Zambians abroad buy property back home safely and transparently. Welcome, Natasha, to the Beyond the Pivot podcast.
Thank you, Kabwela. Thank you for that wonderful welcome. I'm really happy to be here.
Excited to have you. And to get us started, we are quite curious. If you were to introduce Zambia's property market to a curious international investor in just 60 seconds, what would you highlight? What would you highlight to capture their attention?
Well, it's very difficult to do that in just 60 seconds. But if I was forced to do like an elevator pitch in 60 seconds, I would tell an international investor that the Zambian real estate market is still emerging. There's still so much potential in this market. It is not one thing. It is so many different things, and it's got so many different segments. And the hot property sectors right now are student accommodation because of our demographics. We've got a very young population. We've had free education, so we're going to have a lot more students going into tertiary education, and there are not enough beds for all of them. The second hot property sector I would talk about is tourism. Tourism is one of our economic rock stars right now, with international arrivals increasing by 90% in just 2 years. So a lot of potential there. And then lastly, I would talk about our next frontier, which is rural real estate. So looking beyond the line of rail, looking beyond Lusaka, and all the exciting developments happening around the country. So that's what I would say to pique the interest of an international investor.
And what did got you interested in real estate? Because it's not everybody's cup of tea. For example, for me, it was my father. He loved bricks more than anything, and he always liked to read about it. So I got it from him. So I'm curious, what was your journey to, bricks and mortar and all the real estate that goes around it?
Actually, Martin, you'd be surprised to know that our backgrounds are probably very similar in that regard, because it was actually my parents that got me into real estate because they had a construction company when we were growing up with children. So over the weekend, we used to go with them when they would do their site visits and inspections, and we would visit all these unfinished houses. So we were around a lot of bricks and cement. And, in those days, there was no health and safety anything. So me and my older sister, we used to play hide and seek in these unfinished houses. And she always won. I could never find her. She could always find me. So that's what really gave me my start in real estate.
So that's where the passion comes from. And did you gonna lose it for a while, or was it always there and you were just looking for ways how to activate it afterwards?
Yeah, that's a good question. So actually, I chose a very roundabout way to come back to real estate. I decided to do law. So I'm a lawyer by profession, like Kabwela mentioned in his introduction. And I found myself doing a lot of property and real estate work. So our law firm at that time did a lot of conveyancing for the large developments in and around Zambia, Lusaka, I should say. So that's how I sort of found my way back into it. And then I started Diaspora Connect because I wanted to help Zambians in the diaspora invest back home. It's such an important thing for Zambians who live abroad to have a place that they can call their own. And then I went into development. I started building again. So that's what actually took me back onto construction sites. And I love being on construction sites, actually. And so to date, I have built and sold 20 units, and planning to do more in property development, but in a different sector.
I mean, I saw on your LinkedIn that you're also promoting different construction sites and plots and locations. So, I mean, you have to love the work. It's just not that you are building, but I see that in your post that you are very passionate about it. And uh, if you are talking to some Zambian who lives in the United States, perhaps they know a lot about the market itself, but if they have never done it, it could be difficult for them to understand you know the things that can go wrong, right, from the legal perspective, or to find the owner of the plot they are buying, and thousand different things. So what in your opinion are the most common things that person like me, who is not a Zambian but international, or Zambian living in the States, have to be focusing on so they don't get taken advantage of?
So, Martin, there's so many things. And actually, I see people being taken advantage of almost every week, which is really unfortunate. Because, people have that desire to invest, but they don't really know what the roadmap is and they don't know what those steps are. So, one of the things I see is that there's a lack of understanding of the process of acquiring property. And because people don't understand the process, it's then easy to take advantage of them. And it's fair enough. I think that if I had to go to the US, I wouldn't know the process either. I would have to actually start doing a lot of research to find out how I can buy a property, in whichever state in the US. But then what I find is because people don't know the process, they end up relying on relatives. And this always puzzles me because I say to them, you're living in Atlanta or you're living in London or you're living in Perth. If you want to buy a house where you are, you would go through professionals. You wouldn't get your cousin who's living in wherever doing something totally unrelated to help you buy a house. You wouldn't even dream of it. So why do you do that when it comes to buying property back home? So this over reliance on relatives and friends who are not professionals is the biggest pitfall I see for Zambians trying to invest back home. And it's an over reliance. They abdicate their power and their finances to people who are family members. And often it leads to a feeling of betrayal and, a rupture in the family ties. So that really is the biggest thing. And then I would say the other issue I see with a lot of people who want to buy property, whether they are international or local investors, they don't compare like with like. So there are many different factors that go into the pricing of a property, which people don't take into consideration. They'll just look at the size. They're like, oh, it's 30 by 40 and it's costing so much. And then this other one is also the 30 by 40, but why is it double the price? Many factors you have to look at. You have to look at the location. You have to look at the services. It's all well and good to get a huge plot, but then maybe it's got no water, it's got no power, it's got no sewerage, it's got no security, it's got nothing. But people will just look at the size and the price. But the cost that the developer has to invest to bring services to your plot is significant. And this can often lead to a huge disparity in prices. So I find that people don't really take those things into consideration when they're looking at different properties and what they want to buy. So those are just a few that I can highlight for now.
And Natasha, as I was driving to work today in my neighborhood, I saw a house that's being built and it was just recently painted a very crazy blue color. And I'm like, I don't think the owner knows about this. This should be a relative developing and choosing the crazy colors for this property. But I wanted to touch on something which is basically your founding, the basically the story behind the founding of Diaspora Connect, and I think you've highlighted a few gaps. Would you give some real cases of how big this particular problem is when it comes to people that are looking to build back home? And also if you can highlight if it's only just Zambians that are looking to build back home that you're targeting, or basically any property or real estate investor that's looking to develop property in Zambia.
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, the International Organization of Migration did a study with Zambians in the diaspora, and they found that I think it's over 2/3 of Zambians intend to come back home one day, and also about 90% of Zambians want to have an investment back home, whether it's property, whether it's business. So the desire, the demand by the diaspora to invest back home is huge. And unfortunately, they just don't have the right information and the right resources. So the number of them that fall into these traps, it's quite a big number. Also, the problem is that, as Zambians, we always live in community. So when you start hearing one horror story, then you hear another horror story, it becomes this huge mental block in somebody's mind to say, oh my God, if I try and do this, then I could land in this situation. And what I have to say about our friends in the diaspora is, life is hard there. They have to work for every euro or dollar that they earn. And so for them to send all this money back home and to see it go down the drain can be very, very heartbreaking and something that can be quite difficult to recover from. So it is unfortunately a common problem. And also the other problem that I see is, unfortunately, I don't know if it's a cultural thing, a Zambian thing, if it's an African thing, but we don't like to pay for professional services. We always want to save a buck. So we think that, somebody will convince you and say, Kabuda, why do you want to pay Natasha to do your legal work? I mean, I've got a relative at Ministry of Lands. They could do it for you and just pay them 500 kwacha. It will be done. And unfortunately, we have that mentality as Zambians. So, we are buying property here. We're investing in property. It's one of the biggest investments people will make. You can't be cutting corners on a critical service like having a lawyer or an architect or somebody or a licensed real estate agent, somebody who can really take you through that process in a professional way. It's really not the area to start saying, oh, let me save a bit of money here and let me save a bit of money there. And, having said that, you can always negotiate with your professional advisors. So I know people say, oh, but you guys are so expensive. And yes, because we're professionals, we went to school for these things and we're saving you a lot of money because you've hired us. But at the same time, we're not unreasonable. You can negotiate with your professional advisors. Some of them will even allow you to pay over a couple of months in installments. So that is also one of the key mistakes I see people making.
And so what's the solution, Natasha? So you've clearly articulated the gap and challenges that people face, but what exactly are you offering at Diaspora Connect? Is it just legal services again? Is it just a legal services firm? Or are you providing the full breadth of services that go into building a property?
Okay, so as Diaspora Connect, we're actually a licensed real estate agent company. We're in the business of real estate, and we are registered with the Zambia Institute of Estate Agents. So what we do is we have a framework. It's a 3-stage framework that we take our clients through. So the first stage is all about the property. We only work with credible developers, credible sellers that we have vetted ourselves. So we give our clients all the information that they need about that property. Once they decide to go ahead, we move to the second stage, which is purchase. Now, in the purchasing, we make sure that they actually sign proper documentation. You guys would be amazed how many times people buy property without even a contract. Some people even show me a letter and say, oh, I bought it and here's a letter. I've even seen emails, people buying property based off of an email. It boggles my mind. So we make sure that our clients sign proper sales documentation. And this is really key because it protects their interests. And then lastly, the last stage is becoming a proprietor. So we make sure we follow up the the client until they become the registered title deed owner of that property. So those are the three stages. It's about the property, it's about the purchase, and it's about becoming a proprietor. One thing I should point out is because we are licensed and registered under the Institute of the State Agents, we don't provide legal services. I am a lawyer by profession, but legal advisory services have to be on their own, and the real estate agency business has to be on its own. That's how we are regulated.
If you're enjoying this episode, take a second to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us reach more people and keep these conversations going. Thanks for your support.
And maybe Martin would be itching to ask a question, but just before he comes in, I think it will be important, Natasha, to also paint a picture for what the agents market looks like, right? I would like to believe it's quite highly informal as well, but we have these informal real estate agents that are moving around. How would I differentiate between an actual registered real estate agent? What should I be looking out for? And what are the questions that I should be asking as I look for this professional who can assist me in buying property back home?
Okay. All right. Good. Before I answer that question, can I ask a question? There's a question I've been itching to ask. Martin, where are you from? I know Kabwela is Zambian, but where are you from?
I am from the Czech Republic. I'm sitting in Prague now.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I see. I visited Prague as a child many years ago when it was still Czechoslovakia.
It was
a long time.
And I think it's necessary to give you further context. So with the work that we do as well, so that you fully understand why we're asking some dumb questions as well. Our work is to highlight and spotlight key entrepreneurs that are doing amazing things across the African continent. And we have been doing some work where we have been able to manage to aggregate funding even for startups that are in Zambia. That's from the Czech Republic. And basically the whole goal and process for us is just to spotlight success stories from an investment perspective, entrepreneurship perspective, and ecosystem perspective. So yes, our audience is Europe, Africa, and basically the whole world.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and Natasha, funny thing, I was actually born in Czechoslovakia for 3 years, so you visited my country back then as well.
Oh. You see, I told you we have a lot more in common than you would have thought.
Exactly. So I like the Kabwela's question because I know that the real estate agent market got regulated in our country just a couple of years ago. So it was like, I can be a real estate agent. I just call myself that, and that's it. Just a few years ago. Is that similar in Zambia now, or is it also a regulation that you have to go through some exams, and be properly trained, even some basic legal information and so on?
Yeah. So maybe let me start by going back to Kabwela's question, and just to say that the real estate agency business is highly informal at the moment. And while we are regulated, I think our institute said only about 15% of agents are actually legal and licensed. So this is what also leads to problems, because if you are approaching a real estate agent, there's 85% likelihood that they're illegal and unlicensed. So we do have a regulatory body. It is called the Zambia Institute of the State Agents. It was created by an act of parliament, and they're the ones who regulate us. So you do have to go through a course. There is a qualifying course. There's level 1, level 2, and you have to obviously pass those exams. So when you meet a real estate agent, somebody who's putting themselves forward as a real estate agent, it's important to ask them if they're licensed and ask them for their membership number, because you can have people who took the qualifying exams, but maybe they've just never renewed their practicing certificate. So they might have qualified, but then they might not be a member of good standing under ZIA. So you want to ask them if they've got a current practicing certificate as well, and you want to ask them for their membership number. And then what you want to do is actually get in touch with the Zambia Institute of Estate Agents and verify with them. There's nothing wrong with that. You can call up the secretariat and say, Cabrera has said that he's a estate agent. He says this is his membership number. Could you confirm that that's correct?
I can see that family, like you said, members is like, don't worry about these guys. My cousin is a real estate agent, or something like that is happening more than often, I suppose. So for
Yes.
me, it's always almost a mystery. How do you find an expat person abroad that to talk to? Because I lived in Chicago for 4 years of my life. It was very hard to find a Czech community there when I wanted to, talk to somebody in my language, connect and so on. And you are finding those people from Zambia that are living in Australia, like you said, Canada, America, and so on. So how do you actually do it? It seems like almost, how to say, needle in a haystack, to find those people, especially from small nations like we are.
Mm, mm. Well, what I tell people, I actually did a whole video on our YouTube channel, which unfortunately is not live at the moment. We were hacked. But I did a whole video about how you can find a property professional. So the first thing that I suggest to people is talk to the people you know. When you do find that community of Zambians where you are, you can ask them to recommend people that they've used. And I always say, talk to people who've had successful outcomes, the people who have managed to do what you are aspiring to do. Ask them how they did it. Success leaves clues. So ask them for advice on what they did right, and find out who assisted them. And then this is where you can make use of your family members. So rather than saying, oh, do it for me or find somebody to do it, you can ask them, do you guys know of a good lawyer? Do you know of a good architect or a good contractor? And they will definitely be able to give you recommendations. The other thing I would say is don't be beholden to use somebody who's recommended, who has been recommended to you. Sometimes we have this tendency to say, oh, but this guy, he came recommended by my uncle, so I have to use him. No, you don't have to use him. At the end of the day, it's your money. So once you get these recommendations, then ask them for a quote. So you can say, this is what I want to do. I want to buy a property. This is how much the property is going to be. So could you please give me a quotation? Could you also let me know what your services will include? And have you done this for other people before? Do you mind do you have a client who I could speak to? So all of these are very simple steps that you can do wherever you are living. Nowadays we are um, we're so lucky to have all this technology at our fingertips. You can have Zoom calls if you want to see their face and demeanor. You can have WhatsApp calls. There's so many ways that you could still find really good people, and you can take your time as well. I find that with people who are at the diaspora, they tend to feel rushed about making a decision, and I think unfortunately that's kind of because of the influence of their friends and family back home. Like, if you don't buy this thing today, then by tomorrow you're not going to find it. It'll be gone. So they never feel like they can just take their time and make the right decision. So the other thing that I also advise people is that when you come home, it can't just be party after party. When you come home for holidays, put aside some time and say these few days are just going to be for business. I'm not seeing any relatives. I'm not seeing any friends. If I see them, it'll be in the evening. When you're home, there's no better time to network. Meet those people who you've been introduced to. Ask them you can ask an architect, do you know any good lawyers? You can ask your lawyers, do you know any good architects? Do you know any good contractors? Take time to visit their sites. Say, can you take me? Do you mind if we spend an afternoon? You can just take me to some of your sites. Maybe if possible, I can even have a coffee with one of your clients. That's the best way to make use of your time. But I find people fly in. There's so much to do in a short period of time. People are traveling to Ndola, they're traveling to Livingston to see friends, family all over the place. The next thing they're gone. They're on a plane. Oh, it was wonderful, Zambia. Goodbye. You just see it on their Instagram stories. So I always encourage people, make the most out of your home visits. And I know I'm getting carried away, but I just want to give one more tip is go and see your local bank manager. That is so important because Zambia is still a country where business is based on relationships. We can't do everything online. Zambians don't like to do everything online. Get to know the people open a bank account. Find out, I want to open a bank account with this bank. Walk into the branch, meet the branch manager, shake their hands and say, I live in Australia, or I live in the US. I would like to open an account so I can be sending money back home. Because you never know, once that account becomes active, you might even be able to borrow. And that might be the way that you start your first construction project back home. So don't overlook that relationship. It's also very key.
Quite insightful, Natasha. And so, like you said, so Martin, for you, no parties when you get here. It will be, well, we'll have some parties, but just a lot more business. So it is clear that many people, like you said, are looking for investment opportunities, right? And yet they will be looking at other vehicles like stocks, traditional stocks and bonds. But from your vantage point, what do you think makes property quite unique and compelling, a compelling investment in Zambia right now?
Yeah. So stocks, treasury bills, government bonds, what we call financial paper. I think all of those things are very well and good. But I feel that with property investment, it puts you more in the driver's seat of your investment. With stocks and bonds, you're really reliant on the performance of other factors that are really out of your control. So, for example, the exchange rate, the inflation rate. And not to say that these things don't affect property. Yes, they do. But I find that property tends to be a better store of value than stocks and bonds. Also, if it's, let's say, a stock, then you're dependent on the management team of that company, over which in that you have absolutely no control over that. And then, we've had so many shocks, a small economy like ours. We're subjected to shocks almost every other year. We have COVID, and then we've got cholera. Now we had the drought. Now we've got the power crisis. All of those things can affect the bottom line of a business and the performance of the stocks. And of course, with treasury bills and bonds, government can change the policy at any time. And we've seen that happen, which can affect the types of returns you're hoping to get. So I always think it's great to have a diversified portfolio of investments. But for me, I would rather put my money into property. I find that the appreciation that you get from that property, the ability to borrow against it, to make further investments, the store of value, property is able to withstand inflation much better than our local currency, and it's not as volatile. But I want to caveat that and say property is not one thing. So there's some sectors in the property market that perform better than others. So that's why it's also important to do research to know which sectors are better to invest in than others.
We had a guest on our show from the startup called Bosso, who is sourcing construction material essentially. And they were saying it's a quite difficult task to get all the quotes and get everything delivered to build a house. And I'm wondering, you are now a developer, like you said yourself. You're not just the real estate agent. You actually build your houses. Your dad had a construction company before. You have more insight than anybody. How is that? How is the process? Is it still as difficult that you have to kind of call a factory to get a proper amount of bricks, or can you just go to a store, or how does this look like, this process?
Yeah, I think the process looks different depending on the type of project that you have. So if you are building your own house, and of course you want to get the best possible prices, then it can be quite cumbersome to have to get different quotes for different components that are going to go in that construction project. But if you're doing something which is, let's say, a larger project, maybe you're building multiple units, you should really be working closely with a QS. You should have a whole team of people around you. So you'll have a quantity surveyor, you'll have your architect who can also act as a project management, and your contractor. And together you can work out what will be the BOQ, the bill of quantities, and what the cost of that construction project should be.
I'm always scared about these big projects. I studied at a local business school, the MBA in real estate. That scared me for good. So I'm like, okay, I will probably never be a developer. So I'm always wondering. I saw how much calculation goes into it, to prevent the shocks, to set up proper pricing, selling levels. So when you look at it from the complexity perspective, is it better to build houses than you sell, or build houses that are like rentals and you collect rent on it? Or what is that? I know you said student housing is the hot market to be in, but for the 20 units, was it apartments that you sold, or is it 20 units that you are like finding tenants for? How does this work for regular smaller investors?
So I think it always starts with what it is that you want, and what it is you're hoping to achieve. So even if you're a small investor, you might want the security and the stability of having regular income. So then you might decide that what would be better for you is to build a couple of apartments, 4 flats, and put them on rent and be getting, you have long-term tenants and you just get that monthly income coming in. Also, maybe if you're close to retirement, maybe you've got a pension that you can borrow against. So you might want to do something like that that's going to support you through your retirement. Now, if you're younger and perhaps you're a bit more bullish, you can take on a bit more risk, then you may want to go into it more as a business. So when I was doing those projects, those 20 units, I was building up to a great structure and then I would sell them. So there are different ways to skin a cat. Other people might want to do a small complex of townhouses, and they might want to rent those out as well. A lot of people have also been, on a smaller scale, have been converting their houses into student accommodation. So rather than have one family in that house, they have used up every room that they can and put in bunk beds or multiple beds. And so now each room is earning them an income. And that's something that a lot of small scale property owners and investors have been doing. And I had some wonderful success stories on our YouTube channel. We had one lady who went from a single family home during COVID, almost defaulted on her mortgage, so converted it into student accommodation, accommodating almost 20 students, and managed to carry on paying her mortgage very, very comfortably. I had another lady who bought a house in Bauleni, and rather than building the big house that she wanted, her husband persuaded her to build just simple rooms for students for Uniless. So instead of getting 2,000 kwacha a month, they were able to get 6,000 kwacha a month, and that's really rewarding when you see that you can start as small as you want and be as big as you can go.
Make it 3 times bigger, so I just want to say this remark, just by converting it to a student apartment, so it's great. I need to unhack your YouTube so I can watch those clips.
Please do. I'll get in touch with you offline.
Yeah.
Yeah, to your point, Natasha, this could be a misconception or maybe not, but we have to debunk it. And it's that you need massive capital to enter real estate, right? What does entry-level investment look like in the Zambian context, and how does it scale from there?
Yeah, I think it is a misconception that you have to have tons of money to get into real estate. I think one of the things that we're very fortunate to have in this country is customary land. Now, this is land that is under the authority of our traditional leaders, of chiefs, and this land tends to be very cheap. So you can actually get huge pieces of land at a very, very cheap price. Now, having said that, and because I love to give examples, I have to say that the biggest example I can give in this sector is my maid. So my house helper, she has property because she's invested in traditional land. And you find that those pieces are going for 2,000, up to 5,000 kwacha. So money is not, for me, when it comes to investing in property, it's not the stumbling block. Now, as a lawyer, I have to say, I don't like traditional land because it is undocumented. So the lawyer in me just is like, oh, I prefer to hold a title deed in my hand. So when it comes to land that is on title, of course, it's going to be much more expensive. And if you want to be in town, in Lusaka, that as well is going to be a lot more expensive. But we still have a lot of developments where they're selling plots, where they have reasonable payment plans. What I would tell people is just do your due diligence. Make sure that, because obviously we've had a few examples of a few bad apples. So make sure that you do your due diligence. You can find something that's really affordable, but make sure it's being sold by credible people, and that once you finish paying for it, over time, you can actually get your title deeds. One thing I should mention, and I see this a lot with young people, Gabweda, maybe you want to correct me. I see young people having money for so many other things. Going out, the couple can't be cheap. Gabweda, can it be cheap? Bottle service, getting a 12-inch weave on.
I feel attacked, Natasha.
So, you know what? I just saw that Davido is coming in December, right? Have you seen that? Have you seen how much the
Yes,
VVIP tickets are? Have you seen how much the VVIP tickets are? Those tickets are 30 pin, 30,000 kwacha. And I can bet you this shirt I'm wearing, it will be packed. Packed. And then they'll say, but we can't invest in property. We don't have money. It's too expensive.
It's the same thing with the young people everywhere, right? I don't have money, but I go out on Fridays and Saturdays, right? So it's priorities.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely right, Natasha.
So, Kabila, did you buy the tickets?
And Martin, just before he comes in? No,
did you buy the ticket to the concert? No, not yet. Okay.
I am luckily I am not going to the concert, so at least but the times that I go out, I feel attacked by Natasha. I think she was talking to me directly. And I wanted to find out, Natasha, especially on traditional land, right, versus titled land. It is definitely a cheaper alternative, but is there ways in which someone can safeguard or at least protect themselves in a situation where they have customary land? Like, what does that look like, really?
Yeah, so I think that that's a good question, because again, it goes back to doing your research and being clear about what you want. There's some people who are happy to stay and build in the small holding on traditional land and keep it that way. And that's fine. But if you know that you're going to want to get title eventually, you have to make sure, first of all, have you bought in a chiefdom where they allow the conversion of that land into title deeds? Because as we all know, there's some chiefs in Zambia who do not give their consent to convert that land into title. So that's the first thing you need to find out. If you're going to want title deed, then you must ask, does the chief in this area allow it? And then the other thing that you can also inquire about is there's an organization called Parcel Cert. It's called Madim, sorry, it's called Madim. So I think I'm confusing them now. But anyway, this organization produces what is called a Parcel Cert. And it is a certificate that will indicate the boundaries of your traditional land and your name. Now, this is a big step forward, but it's not a title deed and it doesn't have any basis in law. But at least it's something that you can show that this property is yours, and it might also have some weight and bearing in that particular village under that particular headman or headwoman. So that's something that people can also find out, that if they want to invest in traditional land, they can also say, oh, in this area, do they give out parcel certificates? And then lastly, if it is an area where the chief's allowed, then someone can go through that whole process of converting a customary piece of land into state land. Now, that process, I have to tell you, is very long, very cumbersome. It's not something you should go into lightly. It will take you some time, but you just have to have that mindset that you're going to keep pushing until it gets done. Because you have to start at the headman or headwoman level, then you go to the chief, then you go to the council, then you go to Ministry of Lands, and in there you also have to have a surveyor. So people just need to be alive to the pros and cons of both. And also, so like I said, I like to use examples. So for my maid, for example, she has customary land and she visits often. It's not customary land, even if you've got titled land, but more so customary land because it's undocumented. It's not land you should just buy and forget about and say, oh no, I'll develop it in 5 years when I've got money. No, you must develop it straight away. You must be going there often. The people in that community should know you. They should be able to say, oh, they should say, oh no, the owner of the place has come. So that if anybody wants to sell that, somebody might say, oh, no, this place has already been sold. It already has an owner. But if you just go there once in a while, no rapport with the community, then it won't work out so well for you.
It looks like it's not. It looks like it's not for everybody. It's. You would think that like you put all the work in making money, so you buy it, but then like actually taking care of it and being known, even if, like you said, even if it's deeded land, which is surprising me more than the chiefdom land. That's crazy to me. Like I'm like, oh yeah, forgot about it. I got a tenant there. He lives there. He's happy. But I wanted to say that I remember a couple. You were also on the lookout for a traditional land, right? I remember you were driving somewhere far to get it. So how maybe tell us how did the process goes, and if it's similar to what Natasha is saying that you have to go there often, and maybe they forgot about you already.
Yes. So actually, so firstly, before I even respond to your question, I was like, I hope Natasha didn't just scare Martin around traditional land. But there've been many people, I think, that have got many plots and property sitting on traditional land. I do know the property that you're referring to, Martin, was in Chongwe, Natasha, and I think in Chongwe, I I took a break on that because I hear the chief doesn't convert her land to title. Like you can't have it on title. It's quite difficult there, and that's why we've taken a break on it. But definitely, customary land is something that I have been considering. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, like I said, I think it's a great way to empower every Zambian to own a piece of land. And it depends what you want. If you're happy not to have title, then that's fine. But if you want to see it converted, then you need to make sure that you do that. But I think that also what I would be looking out for is, there's certain areas where the chiefs are much more understanding, they're much more forward thinking. And some of them are working hand in hand with the council. So very recently, I think it was Kapirimposhi Council got about 15,000 hectares from the chief. And they're going to plan that out and have different industrial zones and practically create a new city. Now, that's something that I would be more interested in investing in, because you can see it's going to have some kind of order to it. And there's no way that they can do all of that work and then still keep it as traditional land. I mean, I don't know what they've agreed with the chief, but certainly if you're going to expect huge commercial investment, then at some point, some of it will be converted. So I think that's the way to do it. We were just discussing with some officials at local government, and they said some of the challenges in these areas, for example, like 10 miles, they've had a number of people buying traditional land and building, but it's totally unplanned. The roads are too narrow. They don't have proper services. There's no proper planning. So you find, there's a house here, then there's a church there, then there's a police post there, there's a shop there. Those are also some of the things that you have to look out for. So I think it's really great when you target traditional land where the traditional leaders themselves want to work with the local authorities to create areas where people can come in and buy and invest.
Yeah, it makes sense because in the end, it needs professional to plan the city, right? Or even the part of the town, right? Otherwise, it's just like a kid playing SimCity on a mobile phone or something like that. That never that never ends up well. And don't worry, I'm not scared. I already know that I cannot trust Kabila's cousin, so I have to contact you, and then everything will be fine. So,
Except I don't deal in traditional land.
yeah. With any land, with anything that comes to real estate in Zambia, especially for people that are abroad. So, would I be able to buy it even? I'm not a Zambian citizen. Like, even if I put the money together, would I be?
So there are a few mechanisms that, well, I say a few, but they're really only okay, well, let me say a few. So if you are a permanent resident, Martin, if you manage to get your permanent residency in Zambia, then yes, you can go ahead and buy land. The other way that you can do it is to have an investor's license. So, and you can do that as a solo entrepreneur or as a business. And that would have to be done through a Zambia Development Agency. And then you'd be able to buy land. And then the third way is by partnering with a Zambian. So you and Kabwela can start your own business, and that business can invest in land, but you would not be able to own more than 24% of that business. For clients, for non-Zambian clients who have decided to go that route of the company, there are some legal safeguards that we put in place for them.
Gotcha. So I really have to trust Kabila now. It's like being married afterwards. And that always ends up well. So
I always say, it's funny, but I always used to say a business partnership is a marriage.
Yep.
And you must always plan
absolutely.
for the divorce during the honeymoon.
Yeah, in the beginning, it's so hard to think about it failing when you are all hyped up about it going up, right? It must be done.
Yes.
If you are enjoying this episode, take a second to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us to reach more people and keep these conversations going. Thank you for your support. So it looks like this business is fantastic. Was it your first? I mean, usually like the first ones are not as cool, right? So I'm wondering if you are the lucky one that from the first business, you made it scale to this wonderful thing.
Absolutely not. No, I have a trail of failed businesses behind me.
You are
And
mere mortal, like
it's part of
the rest of us.
100%. And I think that's part of the entrepreneurial journey is failure. I don't really know an entrepreneur who's had any kind of business success without failing. So I've had a lot of failures. There are a lot of businesses I started that didn't take off, that failed to make money, that failed to gain any traction, that even failed to get even one customer. So no, it's definitely not my first rodeo. And I have to say, even with Diaspora Connect, it was a big challenge in the beginning because we did all this research. Like I said, I was a lawyer, I was in practice, our practice was successful. And I started speaking to clients who were from the diaspora and telling them, I've got this idea. I want to start this business where I sell property to Zambians in the diaspora. I'm going to help them. They're like, oh my God, you have to do that. That's exactly what we need. So we did market research. The market research was popping like this idea is going to work. We launched the business and it was crickets. We didn't sell one property for 2 years. We only sold one property in 2 years. Yes.
Yeah, that's
so
perseverance.
It was not.
Yeah.
Yes, it was not an overnight success. It did not break the internet. It was a lot of hard work.
And what happened after the 2 years? Like during the 2 years, I feel like a lot of people would lose their mind and just call it quits, but you didn't, and then something had to break. Something, had to happen. So it became this.
Yeah. So I think during the 2 years, that was really the startup phase, and that's why they say most businesses fail within the first 2 years. But after the 2 years, I got our first part-time employee. And then I could see that things were kind of moving a bit. And I should also point out that I had been a lawyer who had built a successful law firm without any social media. Because
Mm-hmm.
back in the day, we weren't even allowed to have a website. So it was all networking, it was all word of mouth, it was all referrals. And now I transitioned to this business where all of our clients were abroad. Martin, I didn't even have a Facebook. Like, I didn't even have a Facebook page. I didn't even know how to use Facebook. And I was in my 40s already. I was like 40. And I was like, oh my God. I thought I'll never get a client. This is
Yeah,
like a
yeah.
whole new world. But if you're an entrepreneur, then you know that your job is to face challenges. And so I had to learn. I had
Mm-hmm.
to teach myself. I had to have that confidence to say this. I feel so awkward going live. I would go live and there would be nobody on. I'll be talking to myself. And that still happens even today, to be honest. But I had to overcome that fear I had and just keep going. But I tell you what the game changer was when I started to actually see it as a real business and I started to treat it as a real business, not something I
Mm-hmm.
was doing on the side, not a side hustle. And I started to put infrastructure around it. When I started to put systems, proper marketing, people, that's when it really started to take off. And it coincided also with COVID. And I found that COVID and Trump were good for business. People were like, no, I think this is the time when I have to start thinking about having a property back home. So sometimes you just have to stick it out.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess the COVID time was good because you could stop, right, and think about it and like make the decision where to go. And why was Trump good? Like because people are now afraid to be in the States, or and they are buying things at home. Just
Yes,
what if
yes.
something happens?
So what happened was with COVID, and actually it was almost prophetic. I didn't say to myself, I'm a prophet, because I had done a blog some years ago about having to come home unexpectedly. So things can happen, and you think that, oh, I'm living here and I'm going to be here for the next 20 years. I'm not going to be ready to go back home until I'm retiring. And then something unexpected happens, and maybe you have to go home a lot sooner than you thought. And I challenged people to say, would you be ready? If you had to pack up and come home tomorrow, would you be
Huh.
ready to come home? And that's what COVID did. A lot of people lost their jobs, they lost their livelihoods, and the way that we work completely changed. So now you have remote working. You have some people who 6 months of the year you can work from wherever you want, and they'll say we need you here half the year, and you can do whatever you want the other half. So people now have this option to live wherever they want, and they're saying, I actually want to be at home, but I don't have anything there. So COVID started that process. First, it was a shock that they might have to come home, and then it became a choice for some people. And so that's why that really turned around our business. And then with Trump, yeah, it was really some people feeling like, do I want to be here? Do I want to stay here? Am I safe here? Are my children safe here? Are my sons safe here? Because that was also during around the time of George Floyd. So people who may have said, oh, I'll wait, I'll buy something in a couple of years, were like, no, no, no. We need to start buying things today. We need to start organizing our affairs right now. Not to say that they were leaving, but it started to make them think about that.
Yeah, they were thinking just in case, right? I can see that.
Yeah.
Could yeah.
I'll ask this question later on because I'm quite curious. But I'd like to find out, Natasha, what would be your advice in terms of what would be the best time for someone to begin investing in property? I don't know if you've talked about this already while I was cut off. For especially for young people, right now there's this running joke around when I can upload, like why should a young person have a plot or a property piece of land somewhere? When do you think someone should really start thinking around investing in property?
As soon as possible. As soon as possible. I waited until my mid-30s, and I feel like I waited too long. Um, I think obviously you can't do it when you're a student or straight out of uni. If it's your first job, it might be difficult. But I think what you can start doing straight away is saving, even if it's just a little bit, even if it's only going to be 100, 200 kwacha a month, even if it's just saving from times trip to the couple once a month. you can start saving money. So you can start looking at your lifestyle to see what changes you can make to start building up a small pot of savings, because no matter what property you're going to buy, whether it's traditional that you're going to start with, whether it's a plot on a payment plan, you still have to pay a deposit. So you want to make sure that you have that money on hand. And you want to get used to the rigors of budgeting, because you will be paying that piece of land off over time. So you want to be able to know that, okay, if I had to pay this amount of money, this is what my lifestyle would look like. So that's what saving will help you do. There's no property investor without savings. But yeah, I would say that after 2-3 years of you being in employment, you should really start looking at getting your first property. And I just find it really funny the way we sort of look down on people who are succeeding or who want to succeed. Say someone who's got a plot, and then people are kind of making fun of them. You have to block out all that noise, because nobody is going to build wealth for you. Your parents are not going to build wealth for you. Government, no matter how many different administrations we have, they can tell us anything they want to tell us during the election cycle. But at the end of the day, the government is not going to make you rich. Your children are not going to make you rich. I know young people aren't thinking that far ahead. But I can tell you now, I can't rely on my kids to make me rich, to build wealth for me. You have to be the gatekeeper of your ambitions. You have to be the gatekeeper of what you want to achieve. And the earlier you start wanting to do that, the better. Your relatives aren't going to do it for you. NAPSA is not going to do it for you. You have to do it for yourself. And I was saying before I froze that we have this thing as Africans called a black tax. And I don't know if you know what that is. I don't know if there's a white tax or a check tax.
No, I don't.
But
I don't know.
the black tax, it's basically the burden that is placed on us to look after our family and extended family. And because of this black tax, it can be a real impediment to us creating wealth. Now, we are Africans. We live as Africans. Nobody can just cut themselves off and say, I don't care about anybody else. I just want to build my own wealth. But I've done an excellent video. Sorry to mention it again when it's not live. But I asked our community how they deal with the black tax. And people have such great advice. You have to put boundaries around how you help people. So, of course, we still have to help. But you have to put some boundaries so that you have your chance to create wealth for yourself and your children. And, people had advice about you have to have a budget even to help family. And when that budget, is expired, it's expired. Of course, there'll always be exceptions. Nothing is a hard and fast rule. But, we have to also be realistic about the environment we're living in. So that's what I would tell young people, to say, take ownership. Take ownership. Nobody's going to do it for you. And don't expect anybody to hand it to you on a silver plate. It's not going to happen.
I mean, I feel like coming through the whole podcast, especially when you mentioned that there was no social media you could use, nothing for marketing. It's pretty much word of mouth. And now, like, Facebook, like internet marketing. And you had to learn that whole thing, so impressive. And especially, I'm sure, in the environment when things change quite rapidly, like with laws or construction laws and zoning, there is a lot to learn every year, because could be a new law, new accounting system, who knows what. So, yeah, being curious and willing to learn is a great advice. It's great advice. And what are you now planning to learn? Going forward, what is your next goal to build? Is there some kind of newsletter for people like me where they can find properties, or, what is your next step, let's say?
Yeah, so we do have a newsletter, and we do our best to educate people, inform them, inspire them about what's happening in the real estate market. We like to tell people what's going on. And also, Ted, I just want to add, people are always asking me, where should I invest in real estate? Where should I invest? And I always say that you can look for clues in public documents and public statements. That will tell you where things are happening ticking in the economy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just about connecting those dots. So we try and help our community do that. We also we hope that we will get our YouTube channel back up and running. We did have a property club. We hope to, we've put it on pause at the moment, but we hope to have that back up next year, 2026. That is a paid membership where we
Mm-hmm.
want to take these learnings a bit deeper with monthly masterclasses with different property experts. And it's so much value in the club. So we really can't wait to revamp it and bring it back.
It's something exciting to be looking forward to. Like you said, if you are not learning, you are stagnating. So these things are great to keep you on your toes, because now, like, we over here have reasons to invite you. You have reasons to invite somebody else and learn from them. So, I want to thank you for being open to us and telling us so much about how real estate works in Zambia. I was always curious whether it's just Lusaka where people invest in, but based on the conversation, I know the whole Zambia is, ready, whether it's traditional land or not. You just have to make the distinction. And it's not close-up system, so even young people can participate, or you can convert one family house to, for 6 students. So there are so many opportunities. God, I need to buy a ticket. I need to start flying there.
Absolutely, 100%.
So,
And for me,
Natasha,
I
yeah,
know,
go ahead.
Martin, we're running out of time. I just wanted to find out, you have been on a few other podcasts, and you do share your story online. But what do you think? What part of your story do you think rarely gets told, but has had quite the most influence in shaping the person that you are and your entrepreneurship career?
I would say failure, actually. And I know we've touched on it a bit today, but we tend to like the highlights, and we sort of reel out our accomplishments of what we've done, what we've managed to achieve, where we are today, as though we somehow magically got here. But I think failure has been a big part of why I'm still here, because through that failure, I've really learned and I've really understood what it takes to make a business work. And of all the businesses that I've tried and failed, I think there are probably about 10 of them. I think really only 3 have succeeded. So one thing I feel very confident about is how to actually build a business that can withstand the test of time. Because as Diaspora Connect, we're in our 8th year. My previous business, where I was a partner in a law firm, we took it up to 15 years. And I am, and my other business, property development, that one is more project based. And I'm now working on my next project, which is going to be student accommodation, a 500 bed plus facility. So I practice what I preach. I'm not just giving you empty advice. I'm following my own advice. But yeah, so I think that failure has really helped me understand what works and what doesn't, and how to keep putting one foot in front of the other every day.
If you were to pick one example failure, what's the biggest example failure that maybe you guys discussed as well as I dropped off? What's the biggest failure that you'd like to maybe share, and what was the lesson there?
Okay, I would say maybe the biggest failure was at some point I was arrogant enough to think that I could actually start a women's bank. So this was an idea that me and some friends and colleagues were talking about. We were all excited. Yes, we can do it. We can do a women's bank where women from different backgrounds, professionals, business women, what? And no, of course we couldn't just start a women's bank. So that was, to me, that was a big failure, a big flop, because you know, enthusiasm. While enthusiasm is very important, it's not the only important factor. There has to be some level of technical skill. And I have no idea what it takes to start or to run a bank. So I had no business even trying to think that that was something that I could involve myself in. And I remember reading a book, and your audience might be interested in it. It's called E-Myth. Sorry, I don't have the citation right now. I can give it to you later. But it says that every time you say yes to something, you say no to something else. As an entrepreneur, you are naturally filled with ideas. I can just look at a situation and say, I've got 3 or 4 business ideas just by looking at this thing. So if you have an undisciplined mind, you'll start trying to do everything, especially I think in our environment, because Africa is still so young. There's still so many things that we can do. When my daughter was at school in the Netherlands, and you have to make an appointment to open a bank account. Okay. That's how mature and saturated that market is. It's almost no growth because there's nobody there. Nobody's opening an account, so there's nobody just there waiting for you to open an account, to make an appointment. But Africa, there's still so much vibrancy, there's still so much opportunity. So you have to be disciplined enough at some point to say, no, I'm not going to pursue that. I'm actually going to focus on what I know I'm good at and what I can deliver on.
Thank you so much for that. That was quite insightful. Even though the idea sounds great, by the way. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No. I just want to say, I think that the thing that's also confused us is this 7 streams of income. Have you heard of it, Kabwela? They're like, oh, if you want to be a millionaire, because now everybody's watching these motivational videos on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok. If you want to be a millionaire, you should have 7 streams of income. That is confusing young people. You need 1 solid, good stream of income, maybe 2. 7? Yeah, all over the place.
It's comforting and relaxing. I need to give up most things that I've been focusing on. But I was just saying, yeah, that was quite insightful. I mean, just thinking about the idea, so I'm like, oh, wait, a women's only bank, probably a good idea. But like you said, sounds exciting, but even I have no technical background on how that can work. And therefore, I think it feeds into the process of how exactly you build a business, who you can bring on board to make it work. So, yeah, thanks for that. Martin, over to you.
I'm just making notes over here. So when you were talking, I was just making notes and thinking, what else can I drop? What else can I drop so we can have a bigger focus on what we are doing with Kabwela and also now with the kids at home. Thank you again, Natasha. And to close it off, please tell us where people can find you and what they should do when they want to talk to you.
So I am most active on LinkedIn. People can message me on LinkedIn. That's where they'll find me. That's where most of my content lives. We also have a website, which is buyingpropertyinzambia.com, and they can sign up for our newsletter there.
Great. I'm already signing up right when we finish recording. You got me excited, very much so. And thank you for all the advice. Thank you, Kabwela, for talking to Natasha also about your property, because that was insightful to hear your take on what Natasha was explaining to me mostly. So thank you to all of your openness and to our listeners for giving us a shot again and to listening to our conversation with Natasha Chiumya, who is expert with decades of experience on the real estate market in Zambia. Take care, everybody, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Beyond the Pivot. Remember to subscribe, follow, and share this episode with anyone passionate about Africa's future in business. For more stories and extra resources, visit tambotiseko.com. Until next time, keep pushing boundaries and shaping the future of African entrepreneurship.